I want to be in this world more than that world. And I think if you start thinking about how much time you're actually online, it's staggering, because this part of my life is really precious and I really want to be in it. Integrity for my dad, you know, to this day. But, you know, in how he managed business, it was absolutely, the underlying thing was integrity. It was just the most isolating experience of my life. But I was on this, you know, this cycle of kind of living in a parallel universe with Dan. In the end, I had 5 miscarriages, and I eventually got help. They're very quickly established. I'm what's called factor V Leiden, so my blood was just thickening up when I had a pregnancy, creating clots that was then not passing the oxygen to the baby. That was it. I needed blood thinners for the next pregnancy. I had blood thinners, so I injected myself with heparin. I took aspirin. You buy it anywhere, right? Aspirin. And then I had the wonderful Layla. I'd never had any mental health challenges, but I understood that was the game, right? That was where I had to focus my energy. Almost every day from sort of the 4th and 5th miscarriage, you know, I would leave work, come home, shut the front door, collapse on the floor and cry. But all of that said, the honest to God truth is, you know, on the face of it, you know, I've had a nice life, I needed to know I've got some grit. I need to know there's some real substance to me, and that I can draw on at any point in my life. You know, I've done hard stuff. I can do hard stuff. I say that to Layla all the time. It comes from a book, Untamed, but we can do hard stuff. So it is a gift, and I will only see it that way. It's a gift because I know how precious those children are, and they mean the world to me. And because I know something about myself I wouldn't otherwise have known.
I'm on a mission to help the world to see success differently. Through sharing the stories of our guests, I hope to inspire those that listen. This is the Different Hats podcast, produced by H2 Productions. I hope you can join us on this journey. I just wanted to take a moment to talk about one of our sponsors, Nostos, an authentic experience of Greece right here in the heart of Hove. In a world brimming with dining options, finding that one place that captivates your palate and heart isn't always easy. It's about more than food. It's the stories, the ambience, the slice of another world. This is the essence of Nostos, an award-winning Greek restaurant. With traditional recipes passed down through generations, each dish promises a story and a piece of heritage. And Nostos is more than just a restaurant. It's a community contributor. Each dining experience supports initiatives close to their heart, from local charities to cultural events, enriching Brighton and Hove's social fabric. They also provide catering services, bringing Greek cuisine to your personal events. For a taste of Greece without leaving town, visit nostos-hove.co.uk. And when you do go, say Sam recommended the feta nests. Oh my God, they are amazing. Okay, welcome to another episode of the podcast. Delighted to welcome the wonderful Abi Mellor. How are you?
I'm great, Sam. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's nice. Well, a fellow podcast host as well. So sitting on the other side today, which is cool.
Well, cool for you. It's terrifying for me. How different to be this side.
Yeah. Listen, I'm delighted to have you on, and I'm excited to get in. So we're gonna kick straight off. The big question that we always start with: success. What does it mean to you? How do you define it?
Success for me is living a life with purpose, having an impact on the world so I leave it better than I found it, and having a life filled with love.
I love that. Has that changed over the years, or have you always had that? When did you first think about what success was?
It's funny because I think as a woman, I might come to this with a different perspective. I don't think it was drilled into me at school, actually. I don't think people were very ambitious for me. I don't think the word success was used a lot. I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s, and I think it was a different time in terms of expectations. However, I think as I've gotten older and gotten to work, there has been a different agenda around success, and I feel like there's been quite a lot of pressure around what it is to be a woman and what it is to be successful. This whole concept of sort of having it all and doing everything really well is prevalent everywhere. Because I grew up with those magazines that said a woman should look this way and this is the ideal woman. And also I went on to university, then I did a postgraduate degree, I went on to study law. So I did the academic route as well. Then I worked at big organisations, at agencies, and I think there was a concept there as well about what success looked like. So once I became ambitious for myself, and once I wanted to have a family, I think the idea of what success was became quite big and quite high-pressured. And I have come to the conclusion many years on that that isn't achievable, and that really the thing that I just described is all that matters to me, and that chasing something, which is perfection, is never going to make me happy. And if I'm not happy, I'm not going to make the people around me, and I'm primarily thinking about my children, happy either. And I really think we need to drop that concept of perfection, because it hurts people, it's damaging.
Do you think that perception, I guess, of what a perfect life should be, I guess, social media, how much has that got to play in that role? I guess
Where does it come from?
Where does that come from? That pressure, like you said, the comparison and going of, especially like you said, I think alluding to as a woman and as a mother as well, that I'm going to run a business and I'm going to look a certain way and take the kids to school and be the best mate, and actually reality that's a difficult thing to do, right?
Yeah, leading a business, being in a leadership role is all-encompassing. It takes up so much headspace. So sometimes it's just coming from other conversations with like peers or other school parents, and hearing what they're doing, and I'm applying that pressure to myself, like, people are still managing to spend time with friends, they're part of a girl gang that go off and do X, Y and Z, or they, and I don't have the capacity for all of that. There are definitely sacrifices that I've had to make. And so sometimes when I sit back and look at what my life is and where I'm putting my energy, I realise that I just can't spread myself in the way that some people appear to. I couldn't do the job in the way I would want to without giving it this much. And then alongside the job, or obviously more important, it really is the family, and that takes a lot of energy too. The life admin, I'm in charge of it, and it sometimes happens and it sometimes doesn't. The house is sometimes looking great. Sometimes, please don't, knock my door. It's, there's things like that. I just can't keep up the facade on everything. It's not possible. I just can't do that. And for some time, I think I tried to do that. And then I heard other people speak, other people who work in the same sector as I. So I run an agency, and I heard other people, and I heard particularly one woman speak. And she just started being a bit more honest. And she said to me, you say sorry a lot. You apologise for this, that and the other all the time. And once she planted that seed, I thought, you're right. I'm apologising that I can't make this thing, or come into my house, but I'm sorry there's a little bit of, paperwork over there, or I'm sorry about this. And once I stopped apologising, I haven't actually fully nailed that, I started to just accept things at face value. So I think some honesty around what life's actually like, some honesty around what leadership's like, I'm lucky enough to also run a podcast, and I speak to chief execs who talk very openly about their lives. And one of the questions that I ask is, how much headspace does this take? And for most of them, it takes an enormous amount of headspace. So if it's doing that during the time they're in those leadership roles, there are other things that just have to give. So I might outwardly look like I'm able to do a lot of things. I am doing a lot of things, but there are some things I've just had to let go of. And that, I think, is definitely related to your concept of success, because it takes a lot to say, no, I can't manage that particular aspect. And at the moment, you know, sometimes it's friendships. I have a group of friends that I've had since university, and I put a lot of time and effort into those relationships because they mean the world to me. But I haven't developed as many new relationships as some women have, having been mums. And I'm just being honest about that. I have a couple of really good friends here in Brighton that are women, but actually so many of my friends come through the work and business community. It's amazing, but it's because those people really understand, have all the context, and really understand and empathise with, you know, the life I'm living.
That's really. I think I spoke to. There's a friend coming up, one of our away day things we did recently, and she runs a really successful business, and she said similar, like it's that headspace and trying to, I guess. What is it that like you said, the facade that we put up constantly of trying to manage it, but actually, especially for friendships and stuff, we just haven't necessarily got the time. And what she was recognising is head down in the business and actually trying to lift her head up to actually speak to other business owners honestly about some of the challenges maybe she's facing. Because coming on that day, really, she was like, it's just been great to actually, because all of her friends, what she was saying, her friends don't run businesses, so they can't necessarily relate. So she doesn't want to talk about the business side of stuff with them because they just don't maybe get it and don't understand what that's like. So being surrounded by other strong leadership, but women in leadership, that I think that being in that space really helped her.
Yeah, I can really understand that and really relate to it. Although for me, it's not just women. It ends up being that my closest relationships, I have more male friends than I do female. I've always been a bit that way, but I think because I'm building the connections with people who have similar life experiences as me, I'm just finding that here, those are the friendships I've developed. And they're friendships that I lean on a lot. You know, I want to, you know, I know they'll understand if I have a question or a query or whatever, and I hope that they come to me, and they do come to me. So you build really deep connections. You become, I mean, you know, because I know you experience the same, but you have these really deep, meaningful relationships with people that really start to matter in your life. And they have become the foundation. And for me, again, when I say, what does success look like? Success is that I have built those relationships. And that, you know, hopefully that they work really well both ways. You know, I love that. I love that that's, you know, a side effect of running a business here in Brighton. It's incredible.
Yeah, it really is. And I guess I guess for me, like what come out of the 100th episode was with the 5 pillars was relationships is one of those 5 pillars of success, and they are so important. Not just with the people around us, a relationship we have with ourselves, and what the one thing I just wanted to tap into a little bit was the thing with the home life and being a parent as well. And like you said, sometimes it's difficult when you've got to give so much of your headspace to the work because you're running a business. And how do you? I guess what I'm trying to say, like, I know Kelly has struggled with sometimes if she's really focused, she's training to be just really focused on trying to be like really high pressure, and she's like, I just don't feel like I've been around for the kids. For me, my narrative is always to her that actually, like, how inspiring it is, because there is 2 narratives there, isn't it? Because people, you could look at it and go, I'm maybe, you know, I'm not being the best parent over here because I'm really focused on this, but actually, if you're doing something that you love and lights you up and you're passionate about, they see that, right?
You're role modelling all the time. That's the word. You are role modelling, and I do see that. I don't think my daughter's about to be 13, and like my thing is that I've never ever had to tell her to go and do her homework, or I've never had to say go study for an exam. I don't know if that's just her in the way she would always have been, but I suspect that it's partly due to the fact that she just gets, we work hard, we've created opportunities for her as a result of that hard work, and that she in turn seems to just be doing the same. I think there's a real ripple effect.
Yeah.
The kids really understand what we do. We run this creative agency, and because it's something very tangible, we create these films. They have sat and watched them. They have asked to show them at school. They were talking about dementia, and we work with Dementia UK, and my daughter had asked if they could put on, find and put on the film that we had made.
Amazing.
So there's some, I think there's some pride there for their part as well, and I think that's really important too. They know I love work, and I think that's really important too. My parents loved working. I knew that, and I think that gives you that kind of sense of not just work ethic, but again, coming back to purpose, like understanding that work isn't just, it doesn't have to be transactional. It's not just about an exchange of time for money. It can give you so much more. And I think they know that. I think the children, so my youngest is 10, and as I say, my eldest is soon to be 13. And I think actually they've understood that for a few years.
For me, that's priceless. I think that lesson, and I'm the same. Like mine are 10, and I'm the same. Like just love what you do, lean into what, and if they see that, like I don't know, but I think I've mentioned to you before, flying with a coffee. Like I never really say to the kids I'm going. I say to them today, like I've dropped them at school this morning, and you go, "What are you doing today, Dad?" I've got a podcast, got my good friend coming on, we're going to have a chat. They see me light up about that, and that's because you get exactly that. It's not that, and I try not to say I've got to go to work, and look, work and money, of course, that's a byproduct of it. But if we just I think that message to all kids, I think if we can get that message across, whatever it is, and it doesn't mean that you've got to run your own business, but just love what you do. I think is the for me the key thing to take out of that. No?
Yeah, the find your passion. Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that's what we encourage. You have to be careful, because today, and I'm beginning to see it, it's about exams and studying hard and the results and all of that, and you have to then keep this narrative going in parallel about that's great, and you've got those results in maths, that's brilliant, but it's finding the thing you love. Do you love doing maths? Is that what's making you excited? Or just not about the result, but the understanding. I want to create lifelong learners. That's really important to me. We still do it, and actually I see it in a lot of my peers as well, where we hear about AI and we go and we're curious, so we teach ourselves about it, or we bring in experts that we know and we get to understand it. We read books, all of those nourishing things. My husband and I are both that way. So we've always had the energy to keep learning. I don't know it all. I only know a little bit. And there's so much to learn, right? So I want them to love learning, and not think it's just, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to get it done, I'm going to get the results, and that is a means to an end. I don't want that. I don't incentivise it in that way. We don't, we don't give rewards for getting, certain exams. I don't like that. I want them to do it for the enjoyment as much as they can, and there'll always be, and I'm realistic, there'll be subjects they don't like, and it's not always perfect, but that approach is definitely what I'm trying to nurture.
But do you think, because I agree, and I'm trying to do the same with mine, but the education system doesn't necessarily allow for that as much, does it?
No.
I don't know how well yours are doing and what that looks like academically, but there's a comparison with mine. Obviously I've got twins, so there's one that is doing well academically, and the other one that's more creative and not, and they're saying that she's behind, and I'm like, I can't, for me, I struggle to understand that because the message that Lucy's getting over here is that she's maybe not as intelligent as and because of the way that the education system's set up. Have you found that with yours? Is it that the education system's set up just to measure, to go, we're going to do it like this?
Yeah, I think as parents we're interested in the children reaching their full potential. And it's frustrating if you think they can't. So it's really interesting having a boy and a girl. And although you don't want to make any gender stereotypes, there are differences. And I know I've listened to psychologists talk about it as well in terms of how boys learn, and sitting down and having, long spells of being asked to do certain tasks doesn't always work. And actually sometimes they just need more physical activity and learning in a completely different environment. Sometimes it's better, I hear, to learn in a single-sex environment for some boys. They can benefit. So I think we don't explore the many, many ways that we can learn. There isn't the money in the system, there isn't the will, and there isn't the curiosity. We have been lucky to work with a few different types of schools. So we did a project for well schools, which approach education in different ways. I know there are little subsectors of education, but for most people, they'll only know about the mainstream options.
What is a well school? So tell me about that one.
Well, it's got a more holistic approach to education, and they do value things like physical activity a lot more, and how that can benefit. Also, kind of getting children out of the classroom. And I really liked it. So for us, we were just creating an explainer film for them, and we're about to do some more work with them actually in the next few weeks. But it made me realise they describe themselves as a movement. And so I think they have objectives around how many well schools they hope to have over X number of years. But I hadn't heard of them until, we were doing a project for them. And I'm a parent who has actively, looked into the education system. So, we've made choices. We have one in the state school system. We have one in a private school. We have one, that's in a single-sex school. We've tried to find the best homes for the children. But, it felt like there were limited options. And I'm definitely a big believer that if children are to reach their full potential, we should definitely be more open-minded about what school could look like.
But it's really interesting because the last few, I talk about this so much on the podcast. I find it fascinating, but I always feel a little bit like I'm not always coming with a solution. But there's no one who's sat opposite me that's not said to me, like, I feel like it's in its current state that it's a bit broken. Like, the curriculum, the way we teach, the way we ask kids to learn is here, and there's like you said, there's little offshoots here and there, but generally the majority are here, and we're setting them up for a life that actually it's a completely different world to what but we're still teaching in the same way. But
definitely.
Where do we start?
Well, I hear now. So I think I was on LinkedIn yesterday, and I started to see the posts come up about stopping the SATs and some of the the exams in secondary school. So I think there are people that are beginning to talk about it more openly and start campaigning for change. I think coupled with the mental health crisis that we know is happening with our young children, we have to act, because there's just too much correlation between mental well-being and exams. So whilst my daughter seems to thrive under that pressure, for many it's just not a fair reflection of their ability, and they should certainly be measured throughout the year or years that they're doing those courses, rather than mostly at the end. So I think we're slow to it, but I'm beginning to hear some noise, which is like a good thing, right? Slowly, I just think it's how you harness that. And there's always this disconnect, isn't there, like between people like you and I, and that understanding, and then like experts in the area as well, like echoing or leading and saying the same, and then the people that can actually make change. And there's always this like big gap between the two things. And it's not just the education system, it's many parts of society. It depends what the agenda is. We're just looking at it as what's best for the children. Sometimes there are just other agendas at play that we have no control over, and also money. System needs money. If we care about it, invest in it.
And I guess like one of the questions I asked recently to a head teacher at Hurst College, I asked him. We was on a panel together, and I asked him. For me, one of the identifiers and how maybe say a simple change, but how it could be changed. That actually, we still within schools, academic intelligence is measured and emotional intelligence isn't.
Yeah.
And I said, why is that, and what can we do to change? And he was saying, well, he agreed with me, but he said an academic intelligence is tangible. You can actually do that. And I thought, I don't know. Since he spoke to me about it, I'm still trying to play that through in my head and going, but surely there must be ways of measuring
I love that, Sam. I love like the emotional intelligence. I say that's the most important skill. It's a thing 100%. I'm trying to sniff out for people that want to be part of Team MOREVER. That's the thing I'm looking for. And it's, it takes time to understand whether someone is emotionally intelligent. I'm looking for highly emotionally intelligent people who can be brilliant storytellers. So that idea of how do we measure that, like, is that it's a thing, isn't it? Like, it's definitely a thing.
It's got to be, right? I think, like, and I said, like, for me personally, like, we're on such a same boat, because for me, like, this not only should be measured, but equal amounts as academic intelligence, if not more so, right? Like, because the life skills that measuring this would be able to do. And then, as you just alluded to, when we relate it to the mental health crisis, right? What is a lot of the research I've done into that area, and you look at it and go, so much of it, especially I focus if I'm talking about men and young boys, but the lack of skills and ability to understand and process emotions. I think that for me is a big, like, I look at that and go that if that was taught in schools, emotional awareness, how to communicate and talk about your sit with those feelings, and this is how you're feeling right now. I'm going to understand what that emotion is and articulate. What does the world look like then if we create a next generation that are really emotionally aware?
So an emotionally aware also includes reading people's body language. It's knowing to ask questions and to be curious. Like, all of that plays into the same thing. And I have, informally noticed that even actually in grown-ups and adults, that doesn't seem to happen as much as I would expect. My husband and I have got this sort of joke at the moment about, do people ask us questions, or are we always asking people questions? And we've noticed in some of our relationships, actually, people don't ask a single question. They don't. And we were like, is that because of we blame everything on the pandemic. Is that because of the pandemic? Is that because we're still quite bad at, like, social interaction? Is that because, but, that kind of reading of body language, noticing, like, a dip or a change, and then asking a question to really, like, dive into someone's, experience in a conversation. Those things would be great to learn as well, because that's about building connection. And I think the more we connect, whether we're children or adults, we know it changes us, when we're, like, making eye contact, or when, you touch someone on the shoulder as you talk. All of those things impact our mental health in so many ways. On a cellular level, it changes us.
Yeah.
These are important skills. They're life skills, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're life skills.
And I wonder whether, like, have you always been naturally curious? Like, because you're, I guess, especially doing the podcast as well, you've got to have a little, I always say curiosity as opposed to just being nosy, but I'm curious, you know what I mean? But naturally, I think you've got to be curious and you want to ask questions. But have you always been was you like that when growing up? Was you quite curious, or?
I think I've understood that there are different shades of life, and I think people are incredibly interesting. So when I grew up in quite a typical family. So I grew up in just outside of Tunbridge Wells. My dad owned a business. My mum worked part-time as a nurse. We had a really loving, stable home. But my mum actually had grown up in Iraq. She was born in Iraq. She left in her mid-20s and came over to the UK, learned English, and trained as a nurse. So I have a lot of family in Iraq, or I had a lot of family in Iraq. And during the 80s, we had the Iran-Iraq war, then we had the Gulf War. So we had a lot of family that were living a very different life. And I was curious, because here I was in Tunbridge Wells with, without being demeaning, like one type of person. Like the people that we were surrounded with were very like us, on the face of it. Had a lovely, lovely life. And then, we'd have phone calls with family, and those phone calls would be halted. There was so much going on in Iraq at that time that I was curious. So at that time, I kept a scrapbook. I was looking for any information about the war, any information about what was happening, because we couldn't hold conversations with our family. Any phone calls were just cut short. So I think the curiosity has come about because I understand that people's life experiences can be so different. And yeah, I'm interested in that. My family then went on to leave Iraq, some went to Syria, some it took many, many years to then go to America. And as we are of Armenian descent, they live in an Armenian community now in America and very successful. But that story took years, decades. And it always fascinated me. And it was always like this other angle to my life. And I think that some of my curiosity comes from that.
That's interesting. And again, back to the kids, I guess, trying to encourage them to be curious. But actually, I think one of the things and something I take from what you said as well around like people listening as well. So it's great to be curious and maybe ask questions. But if we, again, could we in schools, is it something that we can start educating to be really good listeners? Because we don't, I don't know about you, but like for me, certainly on the podcast, I find I love this, but it's forced me to really listen because I want to, I've got some notes and stuff, but generally I want to respond to what you've said. So you've got to really listen, forces you to be more in the moment than anything else you do. So I like to think it's forced me to be a better listener as opposed to what I think you alluded to a little bit earlier, that a lot of people almost are waiting for you to finish talking so that they can. So do you think that is a skill that we could actually learn, like to be better listeners? Or
Definitely, like active listeners.
Yeah,
active listeners. And I practice that with the children, and then it's very much part of what we, what the team have to do at work, because we are surfacing people's stories. But you don't want to surface a story that they've told 100 times. We all have a default. Like if you ask me about the hardest thing that has ever happened to me, I would just say, oh, it's very practiced. And that doesn't really mean anything. If you want to get into it, you have to actively listen, really hear what that person's saying, and then, like you say, respond to really tease out more information. It's hard to be a good active listener. When I practice it, I'm checking that I've understood and heard. I'm checking back words like, oh, do you mean that? So I practice that a lot with the children. We do it where at dinner we always do our high, low and grateful for, and we kind of go around the table, and it's like listening and then responding to, and all being quiet. And it's easy, I have to tell my husband off, and I'm sure he has to tell me off sometimes as well, where you're like, why are you fidgeting? Like, we're listening. Like, why are you, like, it's easy to kind of reach for a phone or, and it's stop, listen. But yeah, these are really important skills. And it takes a sort of selflessness to be that way. And I think that the world isn't geared up for selflessness. It's like me, what do I want? What do I need? And I think that's people's headspace sometimes. And I think that's prevents us. I think, it would be a great thing to practice at school. When I studied law, the best thing about the course, I didn't go on to be a lawyer.
Why did you study law then?
Why did I study law? I studied law because I did a degree in sociology, and then I thought I would like to be something like a human rights lawyer. And then I went to law school, and I basically had the biggest shock of my life. Like, no more was I able to just, do the bare minimum and still do okay. It was like you had to just apply yourself, work really hard. And there were people there who had done much, much, much better than I at school, who were really well connected. I went to law school in Holborn in London. And it was like a reality check. Like, I had thought, I've grown up in this lovely place in Tunbridge Wells. I think we'd moved 4 times by the time I was 18. I think they moved again when I was 18 and went to university. We'd started in this sort of 2-3 bedroomed house, and then we ended up in this sort of lovely 5 bedroom, lots of bathrooms, an acre of land. my dad worked hard, his business grew. I thought we were, living the life. And then I went and I was like, this is old school money. This is like networking. This is people that know people. And I was completely out of my depth. And it was the first fail for me, if you like. I didn't fail the course, but I didn't have it in me to do what I was doing, which was socialise and having a great time because I'm in London for the first time, and do well in the course. And I was barely treading water for most of my time there, which was, a couple of years. And I think I needed that life lesson. The hits kept coming. I then did a training contract, and again, totally out of my depth. I couldn't get into human rights, didn't have the right grades, didn't have the right experience, hadn't done the other things that you need to do alongside. I hadn't been to various places and gained work experience abroad and this, that and the other. And I did a training contract, and I was doing criminal defence work.
Wow,
which is
I
tough.
know that well, yeah.
And I think you're supposed to move around and do like 4 different family contracts, and I wasn't. I was just doing criminal defence, and I kept saying, when am I going to move on? When am I going to move on? And they were like, yeah, in time, and sort of just, not confronting that with me. So I was going down to the cells, meeting various people. I was dealing with legal aid cases, and it just didn't feel like I was going to make any meaningful change. And I think I just had a moment where I was like, what am I doing here? The people I'm speaking to, they've been accused of a crime, know more about the law than I. I've got the textbook under my desk, section 18, da-da-da-da-da. And they're like, put it away. The environment wasn't right for me. It was very, in this particular law firm, it wasn't a good fit for me. It didn't feel progressive. I was having to wear a skirt to work, and, no perfume, no makeup, and all of that sort of thing. And it just didn't feel right to me. And meanwhile, my husband was working at this big TV production company where it was all, beers in fridges and people wearing roller skates in the office in West London. And I would go there and I was thinking, I've gone wrong somewhere, I'm not doing any good. B, I'd prioritised having a good time in London. I'm just being honest here.
Yeah.
And C, I think, I just realised the world was bigger than I realised, and there were a lot of people a lot cleverer than I, or who had just been more savvy, had just been savvy about building that portfolio. And, my parents were brilliant insofar as they had given me true independence. I was just building my life, mistakes and all, which is the best thing that ever happened to me, really. But they weren't there picking up pieces. They weren't like, oh, we know a person who can find you. I had to kind of figure it out. And I think the day that I told my dad that I was leaving my training contract, it was quite a serious moment. He was like, oh, I'd let him down. He had thought, I was the first to go to university from his side of the family, and he was like, oh, okay. Wasn't just, oh, okay. He was, he was disappointed, and that whole moment felt crap. And from that moment on, I just went, bing, let's do a 360, and I just threw myself at everything and was determined not to fail in that way ever again.
What could you say about the lessons that you learned from that? Like what we say, what's your relationship like with failure now? Like, what do you think about? Because do you see that as a, did you, obviously you mentioned there at the time you saw that as a failure, especially I guess maybe with the disappointment from your dad. Was that the feeling at that time?
Oh, it was a fail, but it's good to be honest about it. It's really great to be at this age. I'm in my late 40s. I don't like saying it, but I'm in my late 40s, and it's really nice to sit with this stuff now because there's enough distance, isn't there? Yeah, I was irresponsible, in some ways, and I didn't make the most of the opportunity either at law school or with that training contract. The good thing I did was call it, and I knew how proud my dad was that I had gone to law school, and I knew how proud he was that I was going to become a solicitor. and to still sort of stand up and trust our love enough to go, Dad, I'm walking away from this. So the lesson, I'm pleased it happened to me, because the next opportunity that came along was a wonderful opportunity. And I was the hardest working person in that team. I took the opportunity in a way, and it was the right time. I was still young. I was talking about the early noughties. I must have been in my early 20s, so I was 23, something like that by then. And I knew, and I like those moments in life where you're like, I know this is a good gig. I worked for a company owned by the Guardian Media Group. It was a recruitment new media company called workthing.com, and it was started up by this group. So they'd moved 4 or 5 people from the Guardian over to start this new recruitment site. So you had the big team of developers. This was a whole new world to me. And then you had an editorial team. And the editorial team was going to write content about different sectors. So giving people advice and information and news. And they needed a law editor, a retail, travel and leisure, etc. So I think there were 14 or 16 of us. So I was the law editor. And I remember going in for the interview, and this wonderful woman, and she said to me, what are your salary expectations? And I told her what I was on for the training contract. I said, if you can match that, that'd be great. And she went, I think we can do a lot better than that. And I was like, okay, this is nice.
Yeah. That's what you want to hear.
That's what I wanted to hear. And I just wasn't expecting that. But really the main thing about that job was her, Janice Chalmers. She was a kind, soft, warm leader. I hadn't experienced that. I'd been working with ex-coppers, paralegals at the law firm, very different environment. And this felt fresh and new and a better fit. And so within, 3 years, I took everyone's job and became the commissioning editor. I think it was myself and Janice and one other left as part of that team. And I just worked my socks off. Everyone went out for drinks Thursday, Fridays. And I was like, no, thank you. Put my head down and just did the best that I could do. I took a mentor on from there, Walter. Learnt from him, and just I knew this was a fantastic place to work, and I was surrounded by good people.
There's a couple of things there for me. One like the importance I guess for people listening, for that, like listening to your gut instinct, when you know something's maybe not right, to make a change. And because how many people, I think we've all probably been guilty of it from time to time, but how many people listening as well are stuck in that place now, right? They sort of know where they are right now, but it's sometimes the fear of what that change looks like, I guess, and that's what holds us back, isn't it?
And then practical considerations. I think it was a 20 grand loan to do that law school stuff, because most people go on, a lot of people went to the Magic Circle firms and were earning huge amounts from day dot. Not me. Sam, not me. So, I had this debt, and I'd walked away from something. I was living in London, in a flat. My dad was, so I say he gave us independence. He was supporting me through the law school stuff, which was amazing. But he gave me freedom in my choices. Like, he gave me freedom as in we weren't talking all the time. They would come up and visit, yes, but we weren't in each other's pockets at all. So, I think knowing when is really important, and yes, really hard. But, sometimes you just need those kick up the bums, don't you? Like, I've seen it play out in loads of different ways. I see that with my friends' children, something's gone wrong and then they do something great afterwards. So it doesn't have to be linear. And there are just a couple of things like that, I think, in my life that made me better, made me better. So, it was good. It was good to know just where I sit, and I'm very realistic about that today as well. There are people that are a lot more talented, there are people better at their jobs, but I know what I have got, and that is determination, a will, a want, And I do and have ever since those moments just thrown everything at my career.
So, again, there's things for me there. Like, the podcast is talking about reframing success, right? Trying to do that, but actually, the flip side to that is also reframing failure. I think, like,
Yeah.
again, a couple of things you mentioned throughout about lifelong learning and stuff like that. If we what does it look like if you reframe failure to learning? It's just like you learn how much you would have learned from that experience about yourself, and actually, again, back to lessons that you'll teach your kids that, and stuff that you would have taken on, I'm sure, throughout your career, that you go, actually, this is not right. I'm going to change. Running a business, whatever them points are, you go, this is not right. I've got to make a change, and know that you can look back at that portfolio of stuff that you've done, whether that be your portfolio of failure or whatever it looks like, that you've got something to look at and go, but you've gone through that experience, and we take it away as learning. Like, again, back to the kids. I keep going back to that because we're trying to change that next generation, right? To do it, but what does it look like when you reframe it like that? Because it's just got, I think, success and failure, they both got, like, failure's certainly got a negative connotation to it, isn't it? Whereas if we reframed it to learning, you've just highlighted how brilliant it can be from learning from those experiences, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I was at a crossroads, I think, in those moments. And in that moment, it was, A, keep doing what you're doing, complete this training contract and go into a job that you just weren't going to love. Or B, leave and just put your head down and, you know, do something else just to tide you over. Or C, just make the change. You know, if you're not feeling good about yourself. I have this crazy thing, which is that every day I think I have a reset button. And I think that's what gets me through life. And I assumed everyone else does. But the more I speak to my husband, like, more deeply about things like this, I realise that we don't all have it. But when I go to bed at night, and then when I wake up in the morning, it's a reset. Anything can happen today, you know? Like, I have that optimism and hope. And I think that's what helps if you're making big change. If you're making, you know, in fact, it just helps full stop in life. You know, when things are hard, it's like, it's okay, you know, it is a new day. I do wake up and think, anything can happen today. And actually, maybe another reason why I run a business now is I like that control over my destiny. And that's probably plays a little bit into some of those early things that happened in my career. You know, I didn't have the control that I now know I really like having.
When that's such a brilliant thing. I was just thinking, like, what advice we give to someone who's feeling a bit like that, and what a brilliant thing to just think, I can get up, I can reset today. What happened yesterday is gone. I can reset today and stuff. When did that? Have you always been like that, or can you pinpoint where that you started to look at? Was that the turning point for you, where you started to look at things? I can just reset, or what?
I think it comes from my parents. I do. I think, you know, you've met my parents, but they did instill that you can do anything. You can do anything. Like that kind of solid confidence that you have in your belly. You know, that kind of quiet confidence. And I think that's really related. So, and I think they're both optimistic people too. They have a positive outlook on life. So I would attribute it more to them. I don't think there was a point in time where it changed. I think I've always felt that way. But I think I'm sure it's something about the environment in which I grew up in. And I would contrast that with, and I've asked permission that I can mention this, but my husband grew up in quite a different environment. So his his parents both died when he was at university within a year, and they had a very troubled, you know, last few years of their life, you know, very difficult circumstances, which meant that his home life was chaotic, unpredictable, difficult. And he says, you know, when I say things like, I'm proud of myself, or I can reset every day, he's like, I can never imagine feeling that way. Like he cannot relate to any of those things. And that's because he lives with depression as a result of things that happened in his, you know, childhood, or his very early adulthood. So I do think that it plays a role. I can't say that it doesn't, because we grew up in such different environments and we have such different outlooks that I'm sure it's relevant.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, it's strange, isn't it? Because the more you learn about people as you get one of the reasons I ask so much about, I always love starting out with finding out about life growing up and what it looks like, because it is such a foundation. Probably the reason I talk about the education system so much, probably the reason I talk about the kids, because I'm seeing my kids and I'm thinking, I was similar. I was brought up with unconditional love, like incredible, and I think that just gives you a foundation, just that solid foundation of going, I can do, because I've got safety, because I'm surrounded by this love and this compassion, and I've got that ability then to go on and do stuff. Because if I do fail, whatever happens, I know I'm loved unconditionally. And I think there's something so important in that messaging that we can give for all parents to give to their children, right? To try and create those environments however we can.
Yeah, and it's so important, because that's something, in theory, anyone can do. Okay, circumstances aside, as in if you're in a broken home, this, that and the other. But if, anyone can tell their child that I love you no matter what, and it doesn't matter, and can give certain messaging around, every day is a new day. And actually, we have a reset button at home, which is this, hitting the palm.
I love that.
And it's really important. It's like being like a dog, like you have your moment, you have your thing, and then reset, it's done. We move forward, all of those little things. I work really hard, which I think I'm probably alluding to a lot, on giving tools and techniques. I don't think my parents had to do that, but I think because we live in a house where there are two parents that had such different upbringings and different experiences. And for many years, my husband had a really happy home. It's just later on in life, things happened. But because of that, it's made me hyper aware of how is this impacting our children, because it's not quite the same environment. It's the blueprint I was given isn't the one I've been able to replicate. So I work harder to give all these tools and techniques, this high, low, grateful for, these reset buttons, this way of mediating conversations and giving them the opportunity to do that, become really, really important. Like, communication becomes key, and, being positive, still saying, life isn't fair. I can't say any different, and it's important they know that, because otherwise parts of our story just don't make sense. Life isn't fair, but a lot of people are really good, and and there's opportunity in the world. There's opportunity for you, and you're wonderful, and I can't wait to see what you're going to do. Like all of those things.
I love it. I think I'm definitely stealing the reset button.
The reset button has been used for absolutely years, and the lovely thing is where you were the one always instigating it, like, come on guys, let's hit the reset button, and now it's them. Even like my daughter, who's to be 13, and my husband, like she'll have a little butting of heads, and then she'll say, Daddy, should we, and they do it. They suggest it, and I'm like, it's working.
Magic.
When I'm dead and gone, they still have these things, this little toolkit to hand of things to do. Writing letters to each other as well, when you're angry, stepping back, taking a moment in your room and writing, and then passing it, as siblings to one another, things like that. I just think, and again, they do that of their own free will now. I'm like, okay, even when I'm out of the equation, that's happening, and that is reassuring to me. That makes me feel like, okay, parts of my job I'm doing all right, because this is happening.
For me, listening to that, what you've just described there, again, skill set, toolkit. Though, if we can, I'm confident. I'm really trying to tackle this mental health crisis. Right? I'm really doing my thing, and I feel like I can share stuff on the podcast, I can host events, I can do campaigns and stuff like that. Great. Prevention's better than cure.
Yes.
The way we cure it is exactly what you're describing is creating environments like that. I don't know if you see these. I launched them little lunchbox letters. Have you seen and things like that? So, but similar type of stuff, right? In relation to, I want a constant message on a daily basis for them kids to go, they are enough just as they are. They are loved. I want them to be curious, follow their dreams, all of these positive things. And if all kids were getting that, but actually on the back of these, I think hopefully is something it's similar to the stuff you're saying around that communication. So there's questions in there to ask the kids about those things. And I just feel, because all the stuff that you've described is giving them things that we weren't even given. As great as we've both described our upbringings, right? Amazing family environments, wonderful. My mum and dad, as amazing individuals, they're the most beautiful people in the world, didn't maybe give me the toolkit to be able to understand, process emotion. And what you're describing is you're creating that environment. And that, for me, that is the game changer that starts to shift.
I totally agree, Sam. And we're living in a different world. You know, we're living in a different world. You mentioned social media earlier. You know, our children have access to information and things that are unimaginable. I mean, things I don't even understand. You know, they've stumbled upon. And so this toolkit becomes even more important. So we are trying to adapt and understand, given this incredibly fast pace of change that's happening with technology, where we can't possibly predict the outcomes. And so creating this toolkit alongside habits, you know, I've worked so hard. And, you know, when I'm saying I worked hard, with everything I'm saying work in progress, right? I'm not trying to say I've nailed anything. That's not the message here. But I have worked really hard at staying away from the phone for lengths of time, you know? So there's no sort of twitch, you know, there's no kind of, where is it, feeling anymore at all. You know, having it in a completely different, you know,
this is for
area
you,
of the house. For me, because I know they're looking at me all the time. I know they're watching me, and I know, you know, where you've got two adults on a phone a lot, how can you possibly talk about don't go on your phone, it's not good for your mental health, you know, all of that. So habits that you have and role model are also as important.
Talk to me about them. I'm really interested, because this is one of the things I think I struggle with. I'm trying to get better at, but one of being present, right? Having the phone there is not being present because you're on it. So tell me about some of the things you've put in place to...
I want to be in this world more than that world. And I think if you start thinking about how much time you're actually online, it's staggering. I mean, all the stats around this are staggering, aren't they? So I'm working really hard. So I mean, to the point where, you know, most people take a phone into the bathroom, they sleep next to a phone, all of those things. I've broken habits that I would hate to admit that I even had, right? It's embarrassing. But I have the phone in my bag, and when I come home from work, the phone is still in the bag. And then if I choose to go on it, because we'll all have messages that we need to respond to, I will say to everyone in the household, I'm going to take 20 minutes. I'm going on my phone to respond to these messages. So then I get the phone and I sit down and I treat it like a task, you know, and it's very clear. And then I put it away. I've taken everything off, Facebook, Instagram, all of those off the phone. So I have to make an effort. And actually, the way in which I'm looking at those, if I look at them at all, is in work time as part of our, you know, we use social media. I've got a marketing manager, we use it. So I'll go on and be like, oh, okay, this week I haven't looked at Instagram, Facebook, etc. So I'm going to spend the next hour looking. So it's all more deliberate. And I just feel like I was beginning to get into the thing where I'm a slave to the phone. It's control, you know, it's sucking me in. It's pulling me away from people I love. So a couple of months ago, I said it and I've announced it like to friends. You know,
so this is a recent...
Yeah.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I think it's like one of the final things, you know, that I needed to do. You know, I think you know the way I live my life. You know, I don't drink. Or if you might see me with a drink in my hand. The joke is that I'll have that same drink beginning of the night, end of the night, you know, kind of just joining in like that, whatever. Yeah. So you might see that. But, you know, I exercise hard. I eat well. I'm doing all of that because this part of my life is really precious and I really want to be in it. I want to be in it for the business and give it the best shot I can. I want it to reach its potential and I want to be in it with the children, you know, as much as possible. And the final thing as part of that, you know, mix was this phone. was this phone. And so as I've bumped into or spent time with best friends or particularly my friends, I've said, just so you know, this is what I'm doing. And I've said, you know, I think I need like a little stamp or like a bracelet or something where we identify ourselves. The people that also feel this way and a part of this movement are like, you know, identifiable. But I've said to them, yeah, I'm trying to. So if I'm slower responding, you know, just bear with. You know, I am getting to it, but it's a deliberate sit down. This is what I'm doing and people know.
Wow. That is so powerful. Oh, I tell you, you know, when you, like, one of the reasons I love doing this so much is that it's cathartic therapy for me, whatever it is, but I find like it's fascinating things that I know that that is probably, because it's similar. I shared I've stopped drinking this year, right? So this I've had a year off, game changer for me. Yeah. Probably never going to drink again. If I'm being honest, I'm in such a good space with it. But my next challenge is that I'm exercising as well. I'm really trying. I'm eating well. I'm getting in really good shape. All them things I'm ticking boxes. I know I'm a slave to that phone, and I use it. I think I use it as an excuse a lot. It's work though, isn't it? It's work. Like, of course I've got, but I'm active on social media, so I've got to be online and check it 4 million times a day, and of course I've got to respond to. My first little thing into it is I've just taken off notifications on WhatsApp so that they don't pop up, which has been a good thing, and then I will just. Throughout the day, I will go, right, I'm going to check in on the WhatsApp now, and then I'll respond to 20,000, however many have come through that you go, actually, that's not urgent, but I can deal with that. But that's been the first thing, and that actually just has started to free up a bit of space. I'm like, how do I link? But them things are, I love the idea of having something that we go,
where you kind of go, oh, and you, okay, I'm in, you know, and it's like, it's maybe some of that teenage recklessness coming in. I'm like, I want to be disobedient. Let's stop being so obedient and doing exactly what they want. We're being sold to morning, noon and night through the phone, you know, and I don't want to anymore. Let's be more disobedient. Let's not. Let's like make these active choices and like, have some control over our lives. There's so many things we can't control. And then there are some that with willpower and support, perhaps we can.
I love, because for me, I know, I'm really aware that the kids do see me and they see me on the phone, and I know that and we've kept, like, they're only 10, so I know when they go to senior school, not this September, the following September, that they're going to need a phone, they're going to want to need a phone, and I'm dreading, actually, because I know, I believe that as a role model, that's something I've probably let myself down with. And I look at the one thing I'm always been like, the only time when we're in the house we all sit around the table together and eat, and I don't even have the phone in the same room. So when we sit at dinner, because it's a big thing for me, food is a big thing. So we sit down and we eat, and as a family, and growing up as a Greek Cypriot, that was my thing. So I'm like, so I won't even have it in. It's the only time that I won't have it in the room, and I'll literally put it in. But I know that there's other times that they do. They'll just see me waiting in the phone. I'm listening to you talk and thinking, like, I know that next. But hopefully, you know, I've got a year. If I can go on this path, maybe I can break that.
Yeah, because as children get older, I mean, it was often being said by my daughter about, so my husband's on it quite, and he'll be the same. It's like, well, it's for work. I'm looking at videos. What are those videos? What actually are they? How much, you know, creative inspiration are you really getting from that? But he'd be on it a lot, and she was like, but you are. You know, it's just the comeback. I mean, parenting is just like having one big mirror facing yourself, isn't it? All the time. You know, never have I felt so accountable for my actions. You know, it's tough. It's really tough because you're under the spotlight. It's like, you know, it's same as running a company. It's same as being the managing director. Like, your actions are what get filtered down. So if you do X, if you're sloppy about something, you know, someone else does it, you know, a week later. If you shout at home, you know, the kids are shouting at each other an hour later. It just does. So it is an important space. I mean, we can't be perfect. We can't be perfect, but there are certain things that are just good for us.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
Stepping away from that phone is good. It just frees up time. It frees up time just for the most stupid things, you know, like I now always have a cup of tea outside in the morning. There's someone else's kitten that now knows my routine, so he'll come and visit and like pet. Then my son will sort of notice it, so he'll come out and then we're kind of like petting this, you know, like it's creating time and space and little chats. You know, kids will then start saying, oh, by the way, such and such happened, you know, like these natural moments. And that could have been, and you know, there's one particular stance with my husband, and my husband's wonderful, so I don't mean to be doing him down, but you know, in the kitchen, leaning against a thing, just scrolling as things are just happening around you in this busy household, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, we work on it and hopefully we see some benefits, but I certainly am.
You know what a brilliant thing for me to take. Well, again, back to my 5 pillars that we go through, talking relationships. Again, all of the 120 odd episodes now, and I'm like, and so the 5 pillars that come out, and the other one, presence, is probably one of the biggest ones out of all of them. Presence, the ability to be in the moment, because now is, and I always talk about this being the time where I'm one of the most present I am, because we're having a conversation, you're in it. There's no phones, there's nothing. It's just us having a conversation. And probably one of the reasons I love it so much. And yet, then I come out of this environment and I tend to slip back into not being as present. And
this feels rare, doesn't it? This does feel rare, like to have everything literally just shut off.
Yeah.
But it's mimicking that with the people that matter in your life, because that's all it's about, isn't it?
Okay, I'm just going to say something about one of our sponsors, Redefining. The world of cars, vans and minibuses is often a pain point for many of us. The hassle of finding the right vehicle, let alone looking after it, are all more things to add to our lists as busy people. Redefining's mission is to make motoring manageable, and that's why they provide leasing, purchasing, servicing and vehicle management. So whether you have one family car or a fleet of vans for your business, Redefining are your trusted vehicle supplier. Visit www.redefining.co.uk. Okay, let's jump back to the podcast. I love it. What I want to talk about the business. So going from what you obviously mentioned about your dad, obviously running his own business. Yeah. Was there always something in your mind? I think I want to start my own business, or did that? What sparked that?
So my dad ran a printing company really for much of his career, most of his career. And now he works with my brother-in-law, and they run a jewellery shop in Tunbridge Wells together. So he's always run businesses, but it was a printing company. I just was really proud and had so much respect for him. Yes, you know, he's you know, both of them I absolutely look up to, but he just did it in such a nice way. You know, he had a factory. And so you'd have people from all walks of life doing all sorts of roles. And he was always so respectful about everyone as part of that business. And I was really aware of that. I was aware of it because my mum would work nights, and sometimes we'd get called to the factory in the middle of the night. It's like, bundle us into the car. Don't tell your mum. Would be on the sofa, and there'd be, you know, such and such looking after us while, you know, he's dealing with whatever problems happening at the factory that night. And that wasn't a rare occurrence. So I knew the environment. He would socialise with people and he would look after them. You know, he'd do the Fortune Mason sort of hamper for them at Christmas, which was a real treat for lots of the, you know, like all these things I just watched for years and years and years and years and years. And when things got tough, and he had to give up the business, my dad did that in an amazing way too. And I remember just like subconsciously clocking this stuff, like just it all layers up, doesn't it? So I remember him coming home with a bottle of champagne and saying, yeah, that was that, but it'll be no more, and I'm so proud of what we've done, and let's all drink to Springfield, it was called. I don't know why it's making me feel emotional.
Wow.
Sorry.
Take your time.
I think it was just like, it was obviously a tough moment for him, and he had a big member of staff at that point. But my dad looked after everybody, and I just know, like, the face he put on it for us was just so, like, again, like, so respectful. There's so much honour in the way he did things, and we all drank to it. You know, he didn't, I'm sure, this is me, I haven't even talked to him about this, but I'm sure he didn't want to let it go. It was a recession, difficult times, but he did what he did to ensure that everyone would walk out of the business okay. And then, you know, for a period of time, I think it was several months, you know, he then looked for the next opportunity, and he worked for someone for a short period of time, and then, you know, they've had the shop now for, I think it's 20 years, it's ages. So, you know, but the way he dealt with that moment and the way he dealt with everything through that business has been the blueprint for what I want to be. And did I start my career thinking I wanted to run a business? No, I didn't. It's just I got this hunger in my belly. I had this first job at work thing. I literally did, you know, I was the most junior person. I had no experience. Everyone else had some editorial experience. I did, you know, become one of the last people standing there after 3.5 years. I went on, worked at the British Heart Foundation, then at Macmillan, and I just got really ambitious. And someone said to me, either at British Heart Foundation or Macmillan, you need to go and work at an agency. You've got a capacity to eat work, you know. You need to go somewhere where there are multiple projects, where there's scope to you know, go up the career ladder. And I did. I worked at a wonderful place called Worth. And I ended up looking after quite a chunk of the revenue there. I was interviewing for a project manager position. I met the MD and the founder, and I think it was either at the end of that interview or in a follow-up, they said to me, you're not a project manager, you're an account manager. I didn't even know what an account manager was, right? You're an account manager, and we're going to create a role for you because we don't want to let you go. So they did, and then I became a senior account manager, then an account director, and then I wasn't called it, but really I was a group account director looking back. And when I was there and I'm seeing how an agency work, I'm like, I could do this, right? I could do this. And why am I making money for someone else? Albeit that I loved him, you know, John Worth, fantastic. Mark Ross, fantastic, you know, fantastic mentors. But I did know that I could probably do it, you know, probably do this. But I did that. The business went under. It was during the change of government. Again, I was one of the last there, which was, you know, wonderful. And they did offer me another opportunity, but I didn't take it. I went on, started freelancing at different big agencies in London, got more experience. And then my husband was a creative director. He had run his own business. We had avoided working with each other for many years because we're husband and wife. But then I had a really tricky time starting a family, as you know, Sam. And really, after that experience, it only made sense that Dan and I came together, brought together all this experience, this sort of two sides of the same coin, start a business that could be flexible as I had my second child. And I literally started the business, and I think we registered in October, and I had my son in December, and we took our first big project on in February. It's something like that, the timeline. Yeah. But I had the ambition, and people who worked with me, I also worked at the Friday Ad, and you know, that was a wonderful experience too. Learnt loads in these situations, and people that worked with me at Friday Ad and at Worth had all said, you know, I think you're going to run your own agency. And a few people have got in touch since and said, I knew you were going to do this. But I think it was just that confidence when I was working in those situations to know, I could do this. And then Dan being the perfect partner as a creative director to my client handling experience, it kind of made sense. And it made sense because when I wanted to go back to work, things weren't quite as flexible as they are today. So the digital marketing agency I was working for, which is a lovely agency in Brighton, just couldn't, we're talking 13 years ago, aren't we? Couldn't make it work with me. And I just, having had a very difficult pregnancy experience, couldn't be away from the children as much as that. So it forced our hand in a great way.
Yeah.
Lots of things, lots of strands coming together.
Yeah.
And MOREVER was born.
Wow. A couple of, so much in that, really. I mean, first, I just want to, I guess, just acknowledge about your dad, and that, again, so much of the stuff I talk about is reframing stuff, and how we, I often use this phrase that's from Charlie Maxey. He says, our greatest freedom in life is how we react to things.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
And like, I listened to you describe your dad and that moment, how he reacted to that moment, to come home, which, how many people would have had to close a business, and it devastating, and the message and your body language and how you present yourself and present to the family.
Yeah.
This is a shit time, this is what's happening. But to reframe that, look how proud I am of what we've achieved, and to have looked after it and dealt with it in the right way. The lessons that he would have given, like integrity,
integrity. That's it. That's the word, integrity, for my dad. To this day. But in how he managed business, it was absolutely, the underlying thing was integrity, and I just aspire to that. That's absolutely what I want from work and how I lead. It's a good word, Sam.
So I think it's just, as soon as you mentioned, it's one of my values, and I think everything I've ever done in business, I feel like when I started 15 years ago on my business journey, I often looked at certain people and you go, I just never wanted to. I wanted to be successful, and you're driven and you're ambitious, but I always felt to myself, and I'm confident still now, I can walk into most rooms and I'm never going to be the richest person in that room financially, but I am confident, and I don't even think that everyone will like me. I'm well aware that as the older I've got, that's not always the case, but I am confident that I can walk into a room with my head held high, knowing that I haven't screwed anyone over, and I can do everything I can rest my head on a pillow at night and I'm okay. And I think listening to just how you described in a beautiful way about your dad, and that moment, that just hit me in the face, that word integrity. Just like, if you can go through business, whatever, and life in general, not even just business owners, but if we can go through life and do things with integrity, there's something special in that.
Totally agree. Things will come and things will go. And we mustn't be too precious about holding on to everything so tightly, and that is definitely a learning for me. But yes, how we deal with things and how we deal with people, and it's hard, isn't it, in moments that are stressful or moments that are scared, or whatever the emotions might be. But that is definitely what I aspire to.
And I know you mentioned, I do want to delve into the business and the start of that, and that sort of journey over there. But are you able to share a little bit about? I know you talked about the pregnancy and that difficult period around that, because I guess certainly on the podcast, like, definitely challenges we face in life, and how we react to them and how we'll come over them. But if you are able to share a bit of that.
So I was working at Worth, and we knew that we wanted to start a family, like it's a deliberate decision. I always wanted children. I just sort of assumed that. My mum's come from a really big family, and actually I always felt like a mum. I always thought I had that in me. So my husband and I had been together for a good while. We met when I was at law school, so ages, absolutely ages. And we chose to start a family. I fell pregnant, and in that instance, my mum was working at a hospital, and she said, "I tell you what, just before your 12-week scan, we can get you in for one a little bit earlier. Would you like to do that? I can pull a favour." I said, "Yeah, I think I must have been 10, 11 weeks." So we drove over to Tunbridge Wells, which is a good hour or so from here. And we had the scan, and think I instantly knew as we looked, it was a missed miscarriage. So there was no heartbeat. Dan was really excited. You know, he was looking at the shape and saying, "Oh, look, da da da, I can see the," you know. And my mum and the sonographer walked out the room, had a conversation, came back and explained that we were looking at a missed miscarriage. So I still felt pregnant. You know, I had morning sickness, all of that. And then I went through this process of going to the early pregnancy unit here in Brighton. And you go back and forth, you go in and then they have to scan you again a week later. And then I had what's called a D&C, where the baby's, you know, removed. And I just thought, God, that's horrible. But that happens, but I wasn't expecting it. My sister was pregnant at the same time. So, you know, as I was having a D&C, she was, you know, having a scan. I think it was like almost on the same day. And then the second time I fell pregnant again easily. And then we thought, do you know what? We'll just get a scan. 12 weeks was a long time to wait, basically. And because it had been a missed miscarriage, I hadn't known any of the signs, so I didn't feel any different. And I'm working. I'm an account director, a really busy agency. I'm up in London all the time presenting. Looking after big accounts, you know, GSK, government accounts, Department of Health, all of that. So I thought, yeah, it'd be wise. Went to a private clinic, one of these massive screens up on the wall. Again, you know, it's a week or two before the 12-week scan I would have had. I just was being impatient, if you like. They did the scan. And the lady said, "Oh, it's been a terrible day today." I said, "Why is that?" And she said, "Oh, it's, you know, there's no heartbeat." And that hit me like a brick. A, her delivery was absolutely awful. It's a massive screen. I'm staring at this baby. And B, I'm like, what? How can it happen twice? Like that threw me. Like that, I couldn't comprehend. Once, you know, people have miscarriages, okay. You know, I'd heard that. I had never heard this lightning strikes twice thing, you know, I really hadn't. So I think Dan and I were just really shocked. And what I didn't want to do is go and have a D&C, like repeat, just go, like, you know, like deja vu, like do the same thing over again. So I managed that miscarriage at home. You can't go and see a doctor if you're under 30, or you couldn't go and see a doctor if you're under 35. And had 2 miscarriages, you had to have 3. I had a third pregnancy very quickly after that. And lo and behold, you know, again, a missed miscarriage. Then I see a doctor. Then I see a consultant here. His only advice, they do lots of tests, but his only advice is you just got to keep trying. You got to keep going through it. This is taking time, you know, like this has been 1.5 years of my life, 2 years of my life. It does affect work a lot. I didn't know, you know, who I could tell, who I couldn't. I didn't really have much time off at all. I mean, I was presenting in multi-agency meetings at GSK, knowing that I'd had a scan one day and there's no heartbeat, and that I've got to go back in a week's time to confirm the baby's not alive. And I would be there. And I remember meeting other account directors, massive agencies, and I remember one particular who was pregnant, and we were sat around the same massive table. And, you know, there's like, it was just the most isolating experience of my life. All my friends fell pregnant around the same time. My sister went on to have this wonderful baby boy, who's just done his GCSEs, you know, that we were incredibly proud of. But I was on this, you know, this cycle of kind of living in a parallel universe with Dan. In the end, I had 5 miscarriages, and I eventually got help through absolutely pushing our consultant. My mum, you know, and I sat in a meeting. Somebody at work, the only person I'd sort of told the whole story to, had found in a newspaper a story about a woman who'd had multiple miscarriages, recurrent miscarriage, and had got help a recurrent miscarriage clinic in Brighton at St Mary's, and she cut it out and she gave it to me. She said, "Take that to your consultant," which I did, and we begged to be seen there by a particular lady, Leslie Reagan, who was doing some more interesting, innovative stuff around miscarriage. And when I got there, I walked into the room with Dan, and you saw all these couples here in London, who had their folders, and they were just like our people who were obviously going through the same thing. Yeah. There I was with my little folder of information with the scans and all this, that and the other. And I felt this massive relief, because this was now 3.5 years in, you know. We got seen, they did a test, they very quickly established I'm what's called factor V Leiden, so my blood was just thickening up when I had a pregnancy, creating clots that was then not passing the oxygen to the baby. That was it. I needed blood thinners for the next pregnancy. I had blood thinners, so I injected myself with heparin. I took aspirin. Aspirin. You can buy it anywhere, right? Aspirin. And then I had the wonderful Layla, my soon-to-be 13-year-old. And, you know, when I had her, obviously, having gone through 4 years of just sadness, I clung on to her very tightly, and I wanted to spend every moment with her, and it made it a very intense, you know, relationship in a very positive way. I don't mean that in a negative way, but for me, the experience of having babies, you know, I was fully happy, you know, fully contented. I was desperate just to have them, hold them. If they cried in the night, you know, Indy and Layla, you know, I was just like, yay, you know, I know other women, and it's why I just couldn't relate to other women. I didn't know anyone else in my circumstance. I was happy to wake up. If I waked up 12 times, I would have been happy. 14, 20 times, let me look at that baby, let me see its breathing, let me, you know, look at it. I didn't care. I did all of it. I was very happy to. That's, you know, that having the baby was a wonderful time with Indy, you know, then, so I freelanced with Layla. I didn't really enjoy freelance. I'm not a freelance person. I want to be part of a team, and, you know, I wasn't using all of my skills and experience. And when it came to Indy, I was like, my second, what do I do about work? I've got all this experience. I love work. I know I want to do so. And then that's when this idea about let's start an agency came about. Because I know I needed to go back into work, and I wanted that purpose. But equally, these children, you know, were very, very precious and very hard earned. And I needed to physically be near them a lot of the time. You know, it's a real trust thing, letting anyone else look after the children. Really, it was just my mum at the start. Yeah, and it, you know, there was obviously, there wasn't trauma, because I was as happy as I could ever have been, you know. I'd worked really hard to make sure I had those children. You know, I had to be really tenacious, and had to keep just picking myself up. And I remember saying to people, for those that knew, you know, physically, I'm in all right health, and that's what I'm being told. That's why they were kind of like, oh, just keep trying. Like, we've tested you. You're really, really healthy. Your biological age is da-da-da-da. Oh, God. So why is this happening? But I knew physically I could push my body as much as possible. I felt really confident about that. Like, I'll push this to the nth. I'd never had any mental health challenges, but I understood that was the game, right? That was where I had to focus my energy. And that meant not being around a lot of my friends, which was really sad. Not going to the baby showers. You know, I had to walk out on my sister's baby shower, because it's one I thought I really should go to. You know, I ended up walking out of that because it was just too much, you know, before I had the children. So there's a lot of things I had to do to just keep my head straight and keep my head on. And given what I said about my husband, who'd experienced 2 big losses, you know, when he was at university, loss was a really sensitive subject matter and something he could engage with. But equally, he, you know, it was just cruel what we were going through, you know, for him as well, you know. So I did everything to keep my and that has really set me up very, very well in terms of, which is crazy. I'm not making the link. The link's really there. But in business, you know, that resilience, but that also kind of saying, what do I need to be able to cope with this? You know, I'm going to need to not be able to drink, and I'm going to need to be able to exercise well to run this business and to be present in it and to look after children. I was doing that for this long game, this 4 years with my pregnancy journey. I was very much like, who can I be near, who can I not? You know, people would say things and they didn't mean it, but they were saying things that I just, their responses
would trigger you or make
it was just like, no, that's not how I feel. No, I can't hear that. And, you know, certain exercises were good and, you know, all of those things. So it sounds strange because it was a time where, you know, you had good days, but equally almost every day from sort of the 4th and 5th miscarriage, you know, I would leave work, come home, shut the front door, collapse on the floor and cry. And we had this beautiful chocolate lab, and he used to just come to me, and I remember just literally I'd put my head in his neck, you know, and just breathe him in, you know, and I would just have to sit down for 10 minutes because I've had this face on all day, you know. But all of that said, the honest to God truth is it was a gift because those children are so precious, and I get it. I do savour every moment with them, and I think I am more patient with them. I am grateful. Like, I don't need to wait till they've left the nest to go, oh, it was so great. I live it every moment of every day. You know, I am thankful. I tell them every day, thank you, you know, because, and that is the gift. So as hard as it was, and also, Sam, I needed to know what I was made of. You know, on the face of it, you know, I've had a nice life, I needed to know I've got some grit. I need to know there's some real substance to me, and that I can draw on at any point in my life. You know, business, we're 11 years in. There were great years, and there were the shit years. But, you know, the ones that challenge you more. And it's really good to just look in and go, I've done hard stuff. I can do hard stuff. I say that to Layla all the time. It comes from a book, Untamed. But we can do hard stuff. Because I said, you know, earlier, life isn't fair. It's not always going to go our way. So you go somewhere, right? And for me, you know, I go inside and I think about those experiences. And if I can do that, I'm more than that. So, like, if Dan and I, husband, wife, can do that and come through that and still have love and tenderness for each other, having gone through something really horrific, we can do anything. We can start a business together. We can ride out the highs and lows of business because we've done hard stuff. So it is a gift, and I will only see it that way. It's a gift because I know how precious those children are, and they mean the world to me. And because I know something about myself I wouldn't otherwise have known.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. And it is, I guess we've shared so much resonates, and there's and we say to the kids again often, like, do hard things. I think in life we've got, you know, and there's parts of you don't want to wish. You don't want to wish any trauma or any bad things. So especially with your kids, you don't want them to. No. But there's an element of life is going to be a struggle. Whatever way we look at it, it's a beautiful thing, and it's a beautiful opportunity, and it's a wonderful. But there's going to be things that you face. There will be adversity. Yes. There will be stuff that and actually, like you said, back to your thing earlier, toolkit skills. Yeah. If we can give them things and talk about those things, like the fact that, you know, you are great. We're so grateful for, as we are with ours, and that journey, and you sort of go through it, and you just go, like, they are so precious that you'll give them that. But then, if we can give them skills, and because we are going to face those struggles. And one thing I remember, I think it was Bruno who mentioned on here. He said, actually, in life, a broken human being is more beautiful than a human being that's never suffered. Yeah. Because we go through them things, and we go through love, and we learn so much. But actually, then your toolkit, your portfolio of stuff that you've got there that you can, like you said, you can draw on at any given time when you're faced with adversity, is and like you said, it's one of them things you don't want to go. Oh, you want people to experience that so they can get to that place. But when you do, it does shape and mould us to where we are, doesn't it?
Does. And you know what else that you learn? You learn about yourself, but you learn about people around you. So I have a sister. She's 16 months younger than me. And at one point during this pregnancy journey, so she had her first, and then she paused a while because she knew, like, the pain that I was in, which is generous when you're thinking about someone's life plans. And then at one point she came to me and said, look, I've been to work, I've had a discussion with them, I've researched this, but I would like to offer myself as a surrogate. And I wasn't sure my option. We've gone into looking at adoption. I just wanted a family so bad, Sam. We both did, Dan and I. So we'd gone to the adoption open day. We were on that path as well. But she knew that my ultimate dream. So she came to me with that, and that to me is like, it's in action. Everything I think I've got. That unconditional love, that wonderful tight family, that she was willing to do. And then she had, I thanked her. Actually, I fell pregnant with Layla, and then we'd found out about the medication, etc. So then she waited just a little bit longer, and Max, her second, is 4 months younger than Layla. So she held off, waited till I get to the 3-month point, and then
Wow.
these people,
That's wow.
Yeah, and it meant the world. But you learn a lot about people, and my dad always said about, you'll only ever need 5 really good friends. It's not quantity, it's, quality. And, those people showed up. People didn't know how to react. It was really hard. But people made it known, the people that knew what we were going through, and were there, in some form or another, like my sister. And that's, that again is a gift, just to see with absolute clarity how strong some of your friendships are, not just for the good times. We all have the good times, and that's wonderful, and everyone's there with you. But for moments like that, I did get the opportunity to see just how incredible and selfless and generous some of the people in our circle are.
And it's for me, I'm grateful for you sharing this, because it's so, like, when you talk about miscarriage and actually I remember going back to it was because, again, I think people don't share as much, and you're not aware. I remember it hitting us especially Kelly, it just hit a ton of bricks because you wasn't prepared. There wasn't those conversations around. It's, again, I'm grateful for you taking the time sharing, because one person listening that might be in a position that they can just go and have a different type of conversation with a consultant based on a conversation that you hear or you share. And I think that's where it's so important. So I'm really grateful for you sharing that. And
thank you. There's a confidence to fight for what you want.
Yeah. And that's it, the tenacity as well. Like you said, I think and again, that lesson take into business as well. This is what I want. This is what I want to achieve as well. And I can't go this route, so I'm going to try and find another solution. And again, what a great lesson to take into a business, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And also, just for any businesses that are listening to this as well, understanding the importance of things like a miscarriage policy. It's really important. I really advocate for those, because the place that I worked for most of the time that I was experiencing the miscarriages was led by 2 men who, the kindest men, meant really well, but they had no framework. If they had just had a miscarriage policy that they could have said, right, Abi, we didn't know then, we didn't know better, but we do now, because people are talking about it, and having leave after work, after knowing that you're experiencing a miscarriage is really important. So for any businesses out there who don't know about this, going to somewhere like the Miscarriage Association or Tommy's and learning a bit more and getting some advice around that. There are templates for miscarriage policies out there. So I think that's something you can do, because we do know it's common. Perhaps not recurrent miscarriage, that isn't common, but certainly that if you employ women, you must educate yourself about this. It will make a difference to people's lives.
Yeah, massively. I think that's such a... And the same with any subject about, whether it be miscarriage, menopause, anything within the environment. I think companies have we've got to be, like you said, the education's out there now. People are talking about things more, so we can't just shy away or not even shy. Just it's a lack. Sometimes it's a lack of education for those leadership roles, right? And I think people just need to be more aware and actually take action for it. Not
and
just
it's a bit awkward, Sam.
Yeah,
it's a little bit awkward, bit taboo, bit awkward.
But that's it.
But
it's trying to go. I think everything that we talk about, especially certain stuff I talk about on here, whether it be mental health, whether it be IVF, I've shared my journey, whatever. Do you know what I mean? Whatever those subjects are, they're taboo because it makes people feel uncomfortable. Again, I'll go back to that beginning part of teaching kids about understanding and processing emotion, creating a world where people are more emotionally aware. We can have conversations. I have conversations with our kids around the table, which I gathering from where you're talking, you're similar, that I'd never have had with my parents, but we will talk about absolutely everything, and there's nothing that they can't discuss with us, so that actually I'm hoping that there's not taboo subjects as they get older, that they can go, oh, this is normal to talk about this, to talk about a period, or talk about, you know what I mean, like, you can't talk about that at home. Of course we can talk about anything. And I think, again, if and again, back to role models and us as leaders, not just in the workplace but in life, as role models for people to try and create them is an important thing, I think. So we're on it. So the business, you're there, you and Dan running that, and I'm really keen because I know, like, obviously, start a couple of things really. One, like you said, I guess the relationship as a husband and wife.
Yes.
What's the dynamic there? How does that work? And then talk to me about as well. Like, I know you made the decision to obviously be managing director. And what? Talk to us about that process.
Yeah. Okay. So, being a husband-wife team. So there was a third person that started the agency with us, the lovely Larry. Happy as Larry. He's fantastic. He has many different... He's an entrepreneur. Many varied businesses. And he was also part of that conversation that made us sort of the catalyst for, let's do this. He now just owns 5% of their business. He's got, as I say, many other projects on. But that broker in the middle was helpful because we are a husband-wife team. So I found it useful having a third party so it didn't feel quite so intense. And obviously at the start it was just, three of us doing the work. The good things about the husband-wife team, because we were the ones there 5 days a week. I think Larry did a couple of days a week. I think it's something like that. The trust, the knowing each other. We had known each other for decades by that point. I was quite ballsy, so I had gone out there and arranged meetings with big charities. We knew we wanted to work in the charity sector, and that's where my network was. I'd worked at the Bashar Foundation in Midlands, so I'd start there. We'd go into these meetings, and we didn't have a portfolio of work to share, and sitting there and kind of winging it, because I'm underselling us here, but holding a meeting together, that trust between the two of us of what's she going to say, how's she going to cue me in, what's he going to say, how we going to... We just know each other so well that we were able to, though we were a new business, I think look more established than we were because the relationship is established. So the trust across the board, in how we're going to do this, who's going to do what, has always been key. The trust 11 years on is key because we've grown something of some value. So, the trust is important in a different respect now. The challenges are obvious that, you could talk about work 24/7, right? And that's not healthy for anyone. So I think the children help insofar as we've talked about, when you're with children and we're trying to be present, you're kind of really in their world, aren't you, a lot? So, you're asking about their day and there is more back and forth now they're older, but the children help. They offset it really nicely. So I feel home life is home. We rarely talk about work at home. I think as well, for many years, I was Dan's biggest advocate. I think he's super talented. It's one of the things I fell in love with about him is his creative streak, and I'm really jealous of it. I want to be a creative person, right? And I love that about him. So I was always bigging him up. And essentially my role at the start, and perhaps even to this day, is I'm selling in his creative skills. Now it's him and a team. But I do that naturally. I was always his biggest fan, even when he had his other company. And I would be the one going, oh, you should see Mum and Dad, what Dan's done, like into our friends, you should see, oh, he's just worked on da-da-da-da. Now I'm just doing that to clients, to potential clients. That's what I was doing. So overall, the trust is super important and has helped us grow as a business. And I'll come back to that in a sec. The challenges around keeping work and home life separate are there, but we work at it. Would our relationship look different if we didn't work together? It would. It takes some of the mystery out. You don't necessarily have that moment of come back and talk about your day quite as much. We try to keep things separate at work. He's one end of the studio, I'm the other. I have these side projects, as you know, like the podcast. Yeah. We also do things like the MOREVER meetup, where we get heads of brands together every quarter, and I run that with a marketing manager. So do things that he's not a part of, and we do quite a lot where we support women in the charity sector, and that's a real passion of mine as a female leader. And being that the charity sector is one of the big sectors that we serve. So those things he has less involvement. And equally, he has his own research and innovation projects that he works on, because we're doing more and more interactive content that I'm less a part of. So I think that helps to an extent. But in an ideal world, if you could, you'd put more energy into spending time together doing new and novel things in your personal life than we have been able to. And that's partly because of me and how uncomfortable I am being separated from the children. So we don't go away for the night. I've never elected or chosen to be away from the children overnight. They've been on sleepovers, which is quite unusual by this stage. They have been on residentials and sleepovers, but I've never taken myself out of the house overnight. So I think in an ideal world you would do that, and that would help, nurture that, relationship. I think Dan and I have been okay, and more than okay, because we fundamentally have the same values, and I've realised we're such different people, but we hold true the same things: loyalty, trust, integrity. Those things are the things that we come back to. We can get into really good old bitch sessions where we're like, that person's got no loyalty, and we're like, boom, him and I, you've just touched a nerve, like we're so tight, we're so close, because the values are the same.
So important.
Other things, how we live, what we're like, our personality types, we're like so different, but the values are the same. So I don't know if I've answered your question there, but it can work, but it does change a relationship. But we've had things change us before, so, and we're kind of, we're solid because of those values.
I think that's it. I spoke to someone recently about that. They're saying, especially people feeling a bit lost or wherever they are, and they're stuck at certain points in their life or whatever. And some coming to the end of a career, and they're like, we're questioning loads of things. And it's called midlife crisis sometimes, because you get to that point in midlife where you start questioning lots of things. But for me, and I learned this a little while back, around that not being defined by who we are, what we do, but actually by our values. And when I think you then relate that to the pillar of relationships, is actually, do your values align? Especially sometimes I think over the years things do change. People change. Maybe values maybe to a degree, depending on where you are in your headspace. But I guess it's when there's a lack of alignment. That's where potentially relationships can break down. So if you've always got that, whatever else gets thrown into the mix, miscarriage, business, whatever those things are, you can manage those because of the alignment of values.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, we get just also we get to sort of celebrate the successes together, which is wonderful,
Yeah,
right? To
yeah,
share
yeah,
in
amazing,
those
yeah.
is incredible.
Well, the 10-year birthday, but it's just a magical night. It was a magical night, and like to see you both together, it was just, it must have been like for you guys to have done that, to have grown it, and 10 years on, you're there surrounded by people who was there to support and love you, and you just a magical time. Right?
It's like those big moments, and then with the projects, you know, we play a role at different parts. So my role at the business, as you say, is the MD, and as part of that is to bring in the work. And take a small but recent project. It's for Haven House Hospice. You know, a wonderful client that entirely trusted us. We've worked with them before, a big fundraising event, and they asked us to create a film for that fundraising event. So part of the concepting I was involved with, so they actually chose one of my ideas, wonderful. Then Dan makes it a reality with his team. This film busted their targets on the night. So it's Ben Shepherd, who was comparing the night, hosting the night. I was there. They put me on the sort of head table, so kind of them. The film shown, and then they raised money off the back of it.
Amazing.
Wonderful. And then it was used unexpectedly also. We didn't know this was going to happen at the Houses of Parliament to talk about the challenges the hospice sector are facing. So used the film. And then last week it was used on Channel 5 News, again to talk about the investment needed in the hospice sector. So this film, that's, you know, just one of many projects, but we built it together with our fantastic team. Like the sense of pride, like there's something about building something, isn't there, as a team that I think does so much good for our relationship, but, you know, and for the team, you know, and that's the work we like doing. We like doing the work, meets the objective, but then they feel it's so good that it can be used Houses of Parliament, it can be used on, you know, Channel 5 News, it can, and beyond, you know, they've got other ambitions for this film too. I feel good, I feel proud, Dan feels good, he feels proud, you know, it's just, that's very healthy for us. And I love building stuff with him, you know, I love that. So,
and I guess there's that thing that you both get it, right? You're both running. Like if one of you's running a business and one of you is not, there's sometimes I think to actually run a business is tough, right? Whatever way you look at it, there's challenges that come with it. That let's say, as we wouldn't change it. I certainly wouldn't change it. I'm sure you wouldn't change it. No. But there's challenges that come with it, and if your partner in life can acknowledge that and sits there in the mud with you as well and recognises and goes, actually, I get it because I'm in it with you. Like that's I'm assuming that's got to help from a...
Definitely. So it helps in the good times. Obviously, the stress. I'll just talk a bit about how we've carved it up as well. Yeah. So we had started, sort of Larry was the commercial director. I was like client handling and Dan creative director. And then about 4 or 5 years in, a freelancer we'd used who had run his own business came on board. We gave him a third of the company as a director, and he looked after all the numbers. 2 years ago, he decided he needed to step away from the business because of health challenges in his family. And at that stage, there was a moment where we're like, what does this mean for the business? Larry had stepped away. It's Dan, I, and this other person. And it wasn't straightforward. I'm unpicking what it meant for the business. It wasn't straightforward because we had a glass of wine and a handshake rather than a shareholders agreement. You know, so there's so many lessons learnt there. I had been made MD a few years prior, and that was done on a vote. And at this stage, I needed to take on his role, the person who's leaving, so all the financials. But he left quite abruptly. He had to, which meant I didn't have all the information to hand. So all of a sudden, this established business had a moment where we were like almost scrabbling around to make sure we knew all the right information. And again, I've learnt so much about how you detail processes, like all the boring stuff, but to protect you. So now you would find a folder with documentation around everything I do. My role is detailed to the nth degree. So if anything happened to me tomorrow, MOREVER still exists, because it should. So anyway, we had this moment, and in that moment, Dan and I had to have really honest conversations about the business and what we were going to do. And Dan said, I just want to look after the creative. You know, we've all kind of, the roles had been a little bit muddied. You know, we were all kind of making decisions about everything, the three of us. And so it was we decided together that the best thing for the business was that I take on fully that kind of MD, but all the numbers, you know, hold all that responsibility, and that Dan just thinks about the creative. And that's partly because, as I referenced earlier, he does live with depression, and it's great when things are good. And for the most part, they are always good. But inevitably, there are tough decisions or tough things, and that just is something he finds really difficult to manage. So at that point, although he owns a business, he will refer to me as his boss now. I couldn't have started the business without him. We were co-founders, and we own as much of the business as one another. But we have found it liberating to create this hierarchy, but this distinction that, and he will say, I mean, it's wonderful. The other day, we all sat in the stand-up meeting, and a phone call came in, and somebody said, are you the managing director to Dan? I've got a question about such and such. I think it was a sales call. And he said, no. Would you like to speak to the managing director? And the person must have said, yes, I'd like to speak to him. And he went, no, the person that runs this company is a woman. And we all sat there, and I wanted to clap Dan and say, thank you.
That.
Like, thanks so much. That's so cool. But that's how Dan would describe the relationship. Like, he would say that I'm holding the reins, although we both own the business, and I see us as, you know, as partners. But it has been clear, it has been easier to just get on and not do things by committee and take decisions. So that's how we manage it now.
And that talks about leadership then. So you've embraced and moved into that role, although you've been a managing director a few years, but certainly with a change of dynamic and I guess, like you said, being where you're going to be as a managing director and overseeing the whole business. What makes a good leader to you?
I mean, like I say, everything's a work in progress, but what do I see in... So I get to interview and discuss or have conversations with brilliant leaders, chief execs of some of the biggest charities like Greenpeace, Mind, NCT. And in those women, I see honesty, I see commitment, like incredible commitment, and I see warmth, you know. And those are things I try and do at work. You know, I'm very committed to MOREVER, you know, the mighty MOREVER. I think it's fantastic. I've got such a talented team, and they're putting out such great work. So I'm committed to them, and I'm committed to finding them opportunities to do more and better, you know, like some really interesting stuff. I think being open and honest to a degree. So it's like a parent, right? You don't sit there and tell the children when, you know, you do and you don't. They've got to know that money doesn't grow on trees, but you don't tell them it's towards the end of the month I'm worrying about X. You know, you don't. You know, you shield a little bit.
No, I get it.
I shield a bit at work as well. You know, because you have to. You know, I don't tell them every thought I've got, but I do have quarterly sessions, health checks, where we get together, we go out for lunch, and we talk. You know, each team, I start, where are we against target? I do it as a percentage, so we know where we are. What are the 3 things I'm focusing on this quarter? And then reflecting back, you know, general objectives, and then focusing on the 3 that I was working on last. How did I go against those? And then each team chats, and we do it so we hear what everyone's thinking, and we do it so that we can, you know, have a conversation around that. It takes about 2 hours, and I love doing those. So that to me is open. I think I definitely had a work persona in my 20s and 30s, or mostly 30s, where it was very like, ultra professional, you know, like that was how things were then. And because I was, for 4 years of that, managing a difficult situation, I very much had my face on and my guard up. But I've had to dismantle a little bit of that at MOREVER, because it's, you know, I've worked for really big places and that works there, and this you have to just give a little bit more of yourself. So I would say that's what open means to me. What does a good leader? You know, warmth. As I said, with those other leaders, I'm again trying to make sure that everyone's warm, respectful, for all of those things. But it's really, as we said with the children, it's really about everyone needs the right environment to win, to do their best. That really is my job, is to create that environment where everyone can be the best they can be, because then the work's great, we're going to win more work, they feel good about the work, they feel good about themselves.
I'm wondering, I'm keen, as I don't know how's this going to come out, let me phrase this in my head, it's the right thing, the right question, but as being a mother and leading as a mother, has that helped you as a leader at work, or is it the role being a leader at work has helped you be a better leader as a mother?
I think being a mother, because I think it softened me. It makes you think about the whole person more, which is really important in this day and age. You know, I have a really strong work ethic, and just because I did, you know, I was first in the office and last out, and we'd worked till 7. You know, we worked, I think there was 1 year where I didn't have a bank holiday. You know, I've given up wedding anniversaries in agency life, you know, prior to having MOREVER. Worked really hard. I mean, really went at it. I don't have the same expectations for the team, but they do know that when they're there, you know, and everyone just does their best job within those hours, but we don't work, you know, long days unless it's a shoot. So I think being a mother has influenced the leader that I am for those reasons. I think if in a parallel universe I didn't have the family, which I don't think that would have been a parallel universe. Though I would have found a way, like adoption, whatever it would have been. But sure. If I was in my early 30s, you know, the way I led the teams that I led, I was very much like, we're all in. You know, it was, you know, really strong work ethic. You know, I still believe, you know, and I don't know how this sits today, but I do believe, you know, there needs to be a little bit of sweat in work. You know, it's.
Well, you don't achieve.
No.
I agree. I think there's different narratives out there, isn't there? I think there's productivity, and then there's being busy, and they're two different things. So you can actually, again, I think the key I've taken from what you said is the key is to create an environment where you get the best out of, and that environment might be different for different people, right? Same as we mentioned with kids and schools and stuff like that. So you go, actually, this environment, you're going to be working that maybe flexible working, so that someone's up at 5 and they're cracking on and doing stuff. Great, and you get stuff done before, because that's where you're most productive.
Absolutely.
Which we do, but that can only then come, I think, role modelling, and so you can still, because I think there's still that element of going, I'm a crafter and I'll always be a grafter. Sometimes workaholic, whatever them things are, I'm trying to recognise that maybe I overdo that side of it. So to try and get a balance, especially as a leader, to show that actually this is really important. But if I think one of my pillars is balance, and how do I get that balance right, that's got to be how I show up as a leader as well. So you've got to be, you know, I am going to take some time for me, and I expect you to do that as well, because you hopefully get the best out of it. But I think because when it's yours and you love it, it's hard to sometimes come away.
But the children have given balance. The children have. So after, you know, I described about the training contract and leaving that, and then really from that point onwards, I worked really hard insofar as I didn't have a balance. I remember my dad calling once when my mum had had an operation, him saying, Abby, you need to just stop work and just go and call your mum now. Call your mum and check in with her. You know, I'd realised that I'd let things spin out of control a little bit, but I loved work. I've always loved my work. They lost it. I've always loved my work and I've got so much out of it. But that's why the children have been, you know, wonderful for many reasons. But one of them is they do give balance.
Yeah, nice. And what about something you said really early on, and I'm keen to just some of the work you do. Like, obviously, you work in the charity sector because that was obviously a bit of your network anyway, so that was an alignment. But like, so much of what you do is around purpose, right? And you highlighted something earlier, that wasn't it, where you mentioned about, you know, right at the beginning, talking about success actually impact on the world and leaving it in a better place, right? So talk to me a little bit about that, and I guess in the work you do and how important that is from MOREVER as a whole to be an agency led with purpose, I guess. Talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, I think I've always felt that way, you know, from being a teen. Like, it's kind of that teenage feeling that I've kept throughout, like about, you know, how unjust things are in the world. And yet, from everything I've read, whether it was around food and inequality, I studied sociology at university because of my interest in these subject matters. All of these things can be solved. And it's true of many of the charities that we work with. So with money comes research, comes answers. And that's true whether you're talking about miscarriage, we were lucky enough to work with Tommy's, or whether you're talking about dementia, you know, huge strides. Stroke, we work with Stroke Association, huge strides with research. So I'm a big believer that change can happen. It's just the agenda and the want and the will, as I spoke about earlier. And I just want to be part of that. I just want... Time is precious, and if I'm putting it to work, which I do, so particularly with MOREVER, time is time away from children. Time is sacrificing something somewhere. So it has to be for good. And MOREVER's been the place and the space where I've been able to realise something that I felt as a teenager, something I felt for many years, but I didn't have a job in which I could really bring that to life. I worked at, you know, I created recruitment websites for Friday Ad. I worked at Worth on accounts as varied as a Department of Health, which was a kind of for good, but GSK, Lucasade Sport, you know, I looked after that. I worked with Stella McCartney at iCrossing and Bode, you know. I wasn't able to fulfil something I've always been interested in, something I've written about, something I care about, and MOREVER was that space. I'd had a year at the British Heart Foundation and months at Macmillan because it's a freelance role. And that was the thing I wanted to, you know, go back to. I think, what do I think? I think it's a necessity now to choose your priorities wisely. You know, it isn't really about individuals, it's about big corporations and how they make choices. They have more influence than us. But I think the world is changing at pace, and I think there's scary stuff happening, and I think it's a necessity to be wise with choices we make. MOREVER is a wonderful space where we can support charities, changemakers, to raise money, raise awareness, make those changes. We also do a lot in health, because health has always been in the background something, whether it's physical health and the effects I've seen of that, or mental health, which I know is one of your passions, is something I'm a great believer in. And I think over the last 3-4 years, that need has only become more pronounced, that we have to focus our energy on mental health. So it's not just mental health charities, for example, which we have worked with. We are also working with commercial companies that work in the health sector. So 2 weeks ago, was it 2 2 weeks ago, we were at a conference in London where we had created a prototype, which is an 8-minute experience where people go into it. So we've done all the visuals around it. There's sound, which is like human resonance, and you sit down and you have this experience, and we tested people's blood pressure before and after, and then we captured how they felt, and people felt calmer, more relaxed. And that could be used in so many different ways. They're called soul space, and we're working with them. So we did the prototype, and then we'd like to go on with work with them as they do iterations of that. And the view is that would be in every GP surgery, every school, library. You know, this can be used in so many different ways, but it's because there is a need. And they're health practitioners, and they're partnering with us as a creative agency to tackle the mental health crisis, and also just to teach people to make time in their day, in this instance 8 minutes, to help them breathe. So this is a real interest of mine, and MOREVER is perfectly placed to help in these new emerging spaces, having all the experience that we have got. We also work in the environmental space as well, so it's people and planet. All of these things I'm passionate about, and I've got a team that's really passionate about them too. And I just want to continue to learn so that we can understand how we can take our storytelling skills and match that with technology to do more.
Love that. And there's something, a couple of bits there for me. I'm really conscious of similar in the sense you go, want to have an impact in some way. I want to make the world a better place in some way, better than I found it, I guess, and what I'm part of. And I think sometimes I look at the stuff and I'm like, this is too big for me. It's too big. But you then go, actually, take it back and you go, if I can do the things and just, even if we just change our little corner of the world, maybe we create ripple effects to. And I guess with what you do with MOREVER, I'm working on a big scale with some big charities and stuff like that. The impact that you have, the ripple that you can create. We're creating some waves, right? So
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so.
Nice. It's amazing.
I'm really ambitious for the agency. I think, 11 years in is a great place to be. Because you have so much experience. You have, again, it doesn't sound like the most interesting stuff, but you have this backbone of a process that you've honed over 11 years, which enables you to do the really exciting creative stuff. So it's doing both really well. Like the process feels good for the clients, but the output meets its objectives. And even in that small example of Haven House, goes beyond. And that's what I'm interested in. But I am ambitious. I think this is what is needed right now, and our interest in not staying still. We could keep making impactful, powerful films, and that's important. We could keep doing that because that's what we're known for. But actually, we're pushing ourselves beyond that and saying, what does interactive content look like? How can that work for our clients? Amazing. That's what I'm interested in. So. Yeah, charity, changemakers, health, these are big sectors that we can, work some magic in.
Amazing. A couple of things. We're just coming towards the end, but a couple of bits I want to just touch on. Like legacy. How important is that to you? What do you see as the legacy for MOREVER?
I think the legacy would be, that I would hope for, would be, I would want it to be remembered as a nice place to work, and that the work has lived on, beyond. But I think it's really nice just to be thought of well. I just like a good sentiment, a good feeling. I want people to say, and I want this community we're building beyond the live projects, So it's not just the creative services, but the podcast, the community, of heads of brands, heads of creative, in charity and changemaker organisations is important too, because it's giving more agency to women. What tends to happen is that you have lots of women in these roles until you don't, at those higher levels. So the idea of sharing stories of women that are chief executives from different walks of life, very different stories, feels really important. It's back to that, if you can't see it, you can't be it kind of approach. So I hope the legacy is a feeling that, it was good to work with them, or it was nice to work there, or the work had real impact, and I remember Mark Ralphs at Worth saying, the work you do with your clients should be part of their career milestones. It would enable them to get that promotion or to step out of that place and go on somewhere else. I thought that was good. And then beyond that, that community should and will in time, I believe, be responsible for some change for women in these sectors.
With being a woman as a leader yourself, Layla comes to you and wants to work in the business or take over the business. What do you say to her?
Go girl,
Really?
Go girl, you do a super job. Yeah, really? I'd love her. I'd love that. I mean, she can do whatever she wants in life. She really, really, there's no pressure. But I'd love to see it live on in that way, I said earlier, things come, things go. Whatever happens, if it stopped, this evening, I would still feel so proud of MOREVER and everything we've achieved. If it goes on and grows, amazing. That's what I'm secretly wishing for. I would encourage that if that's what she wanted.
Yeah. What all that you've learnt over through personal stuff as well as the business, you go back to your 20-year-old self, what advice do you give? What would you say?
Yeah, do as you do. I mean, I would say, really wouldn't have changed anything. I think I always felt like I just built my life brick by brick. I felt like I did that. Obviously, wonderful people in the background, but I had that sense of agency. And, that'll be the hardest thing to pass on to the children, actually. That will be the hardest thing, because today is different and we cushion them a lot. We have to. We're being very mindful. What advice would I say? I think I lead with the heart, not the head. And I think that's probably the journey I've been on. And that means that you'll get bumps, but you'll get really high highs. And, you'll end up with a Dan who's, a wonderful, creative, led by the heart person as well. And that, your life will be that. Like you say, I won't be the richest person in the room, but it just doesn't matter to me. That's not of interest. It's the people I surround myself with, the work that we do, my ambitions and hunger for MOREVER. So, just, if you're 20, be 20, try stuff, be a little bit disobedient, challenge stuff. Everyone I love and I'm really close to has a hell of a lot of soul and a tiny bit of recklessness in them, okay? Just a little bit. Everyone I am close to, and I find those people, that's it. I wouldn't try and say any more than that, because I think people got to try, fail, figure out, and that will make you strong, won't it?
Amazing. We've got a closing edition on this podcast. You've been to our top table events, haven't you?
I have, Sam. You
love the cards, the dreaded cards. So choose a card, any card, pass it back to me.
Okay.
life feels overwhelming, how do you regain balance and a clear perspective?
Spoken a lot about other people and people in our lives and how important they are. Actually, though it's even hard to say out loud, the most important person is yourself, right? And you've got to be able to sit with yourself. So finding a space to be by yourself and sit down, and I say this expression a lot in, particularly my family life, hear your own voice is really important. So it doesn't matter where that place is. It might be a walk on the beach if you're in Brighton. It could be, a walk in nature on the downs. But actually, sometimes it's healthy to be alone and to be okay with that. And that's what I would personally do. I would hear my own voice and just, recenter in that way.
Brilliant. Abby, thank you so much. What a absolutely just wonderful conversation. I'm so grateful. I really am. There's so much to take away for me personally, and I'm hoping, I'm sure for the listeners as well. But keep doing what you guys are doing, because it's special, and you are having that impact on the world. So thank you so much. This has been amazing.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks for the space to talk like this. It's amazing.
And that, as they say, is a wrap.